Oh yeah, on the left. Tourist, sir. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Good morning, Gen Rinpoche.
Oh yeah. More or less. Pugmedo yache. Oh yeah, yes. That one do cheto. Susu de sere. That way. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that question me tell you. Auto. Tando chapki, chapkuchas. Tando mo. Oh, that.
Morning, Gen Rinpoche.
Yeah.
And morning, Katrina. And thank you for joining us, everyone online. We'll begin with some prayers, which you can find a link to in the chat box. To the teacher and now transcendent destroyer, the one that's gone, full destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God to bliss, nor of the world's supreme guide to beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When supreme among humans you are born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing to be the occults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, Portland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all Dharma in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah.
İlk sången.
Oh yeah. 가려고. 우리 연대는지 만부 총하신 세럽 이시 요소 딱 뵙고 서긴 도시에 하다 메셔가 좀더 하이라라 차서로. 어야. 다대하러 왕아라서 가서 그래. 어야. 제 많이 봐. 겨치마. 너도 하다 메고봐. 개발자시 토벌자스로 대체도 니 샹래야 서와방바 메송게 동에래 다 하다 메고봐 톱지치도 샹래 서와방바 너네 추네 메세와 대신식과 남지 소식도 소 되셔는 서와방바 세트나 되도요라 서와방배나 펜바투바테 요거라고 펜바투고는 고쳐방이 요래도 사실 최진나 되도 그렇게 요래 너네 추네 메세와 대시고 남지 소식 다단단 아주 문대체 원도 하다 메고봐 톱지가 추 서와방에 진내기 펜바투바테 자고 요도 좋은 거라서 기부 청구 있나 되네 이바데 내래게 추서라 동해 탐절 코에 동해를 타르슈 내래게 추 되네 타바토베체도 동이 양에 대바되어서 다음에 바꾸면 가서 다 좋은 동반이 참으삼을 당고래도 되면은 가가 삼사 소수마도 삼기뱅게 삼을때 삼사를 삼을 코나 또 신들으라 라장장마도 삼을 먹고 개장 전대 삼을 숙십부터 때만들 삼사 전대 삼을 코도 내려라 동이 양에 대바돼서 동반이서 가서 개체수 수치되면서 개체수지 요 삼사들 너를 삼 대견 가가 용거를 삼당 되라 존나 당가서 동지 마부셔서라 나서야 돼 풍불할 때는 딱 봐서 마도 소수 남주 삼번하신가 라와한테 매삼 아니 나이세 그 라와 앞에 숙심부수 나든님도 짠네 숙심부 중에 줘라 어디야 그 신자 기회 유마도 텐데시매 삼사시 다음에 보다 메타 발라서 봐 단다 그 작다 콘도다 가제다 차도다 전심다 내심라 속바 태서 녀모 지내지 봐야 딱쇼다 신조세라라 맞아 콘서 출루다 미리다 롱바다 텐데셔네 딱쇼다 신조다 차다 봐야 라조라 차고 신조라 따와 뒷방 배치돼 타르바토 배치래도 도와 내leg 쳐래도 내발렉바 코에 렉바르시는 코 윤로 계시라 타르바토스는 내발렉바선 유라메베니 타르바토고라 동엘을 라리아 녹바메베 타르바토고라 내리게 쉬어서도 대야 라지부 내 코에 동엘에 타르 삼루타나 마라브레 삼제 와 라게 첸디 쳔베 심제 상마 탐제 란다 드와메 게치 요 말에 파말라서 베로와 셴야 심제 상마 탐제 아니 란다 드와 대완돌레 동에 멘데베 짱하데 되어라 소수나시 강가 삼리와라 대와 돌레 동에 멘데 동에 마주나 삼디와라 어디도 란다 대완돌레 동에 멘데베 송바임베 셴리아 네 가서레 랑게 대화 주바신도 샹라 진이 대화 용화 탑시 동해 매용화 탑시 제고래 섬 충발의 섬 다다 셴도 냐반에 담부니도 배데고 대단 동해 냐반에 탐제 다이소 아차스 기부 쳔베 섬로 된 거라 저 동만 매반에 라 코에 동해 이렇게 나와 마오반에 두스탱게 된 마스네 타르바토바 차고요 섬 대란다 나와 심제 셴다 상마 탐제자 아니 대완돌라 동해 메도바란다 송바임베 대주 상마 탐제 동해다 자와다 대와 타르베 대와랑 고토바시 차고요 삼사 삼루다 다데 단다랑게 제토고 말에 단다랑게 진리지 샬레 소아파 페바 투베레 마도 타르심베 코네 셴데 투베 네바 용수 쪽베 코네 샬레 페바 투베다 데네 소아방베 코네 페바 투베테 용고 말도 텔레야 산제 유코바 타고 라께 군세 연대 군대 탑다 시럽 네가 용수 타르심바에게 텐데 간사시 유로 차고요 삼던도나 산제 유코바 타고 차고요서라 삼부 타르시 연대 타르시바 랑도르지 연대 타르시바 네가 용수 쪽바 네가 용수 쪽바 거네 심전지 때 산제 유코바지 지내게 토버차섬 유릉부 삼로다 소소대 여름부터 삼로다고라 신대 장장 대야의 말에 교토유시 대요도 교와시마 대시마시마시마 전에 미강생세 다른부 삼로다 로짜게세 로그베 탑다 시럽이 참마불로 롭게 삼고로 왔다도 롭토구면에 림지림지게 로바차게 삼 텐데 로발을 때는 산제지 고반시 지내게 토버셔 대시도 아니 추년기 요삼 건되셔다 녜레기 추로와 산제지 고반 토발을 소바 어때서 추 산제기 소바데 녜네 텔라 터바체 진리지 삼로다 아니 양 진리지 냠솔랑기 삼 테니 자주고 심 마다 쯤아 순제 세담네 셈버쇼스야 어디를
Yes. So here, to begin with, we should not be thinking just about this life, but rather in order to gain a good, sort of fully qualified rebirth in the future as a human or a god, wherein we are able to continue to practice the Dharma, at the very least, we should abandon harming others. And contained within that is the kind of want to benefit them as well. As it is said, the Buddha has sort of summarized the Dharma, the Tathagata has summarized the Dharma into non-harm. So however much we can, we should abandon harming others. We should give that up and instead try to, as much as we are able to, strive to benefit other sentient beings with the goal of not being born in the lower realms and instead gaining a good rebirth. But thinking beyond that, there is the Dharma of what we call definite goodness, thinking about not just gaining a good rebirth, but getting out of that cycle altogether, looking at the kind of meaning of emptiness and selflessness, thinking about this thought of I, that leads us, by grasping at that strongly, to then engage in all sorts of other afflictions. And so in order to avert that, in order to get rid of that, we need to train in emptiness that will bring about the state of nirvana, thinking that we are mistaken in this thought of I, and the way that we perceive it as something that is like autonomous, independent, wherein it is really something that is just designated on the basis of the aggregates. We don't hold it to exist in that way, but instead hold it as though this I were autonomous, and the mine then becomes an object of our craving. And so as much as we are able to counteract that through thinking about emptiness and thinking about subtle selflessness, we are able to then get rid of these thoughts of us and them, whether it's based upon sort of our lineage or our religion or whatever it may be, and all of the kinds of afflictions that arise from that, like pride and jealousy and anger and attachment and competitiveness and so forth. And so those kinds of dharmas, those activities that pursue liberation or that lead to liberation are those that will eliminate our suffering. We will no longer have to continue to suffer in this cycle of samsara. But thinking then that it's not right to just pursue our own liberation, because when we look around, all of these other sentient beings are connected to us. They have acted as our kind mothers and fathers. And so to strive for our own liberation alone is really not suitable. And we also recognize that these beings as well are equal in wanting to have happiness and not wanting to have to suffer. They are just the same as us in that way. And so we then, looking at these other sentient beings, develop this wish to be able to achieve their happiness and eliminate their suffering. It's not appropriate for us to just strive for our own benefit. And so this thought of only ourselves is sort of given up, recognizing that all of these beings are in the same kind of situation. And though right now we don't have the ability to eliminate all of their sufferings and place them in that highest happiness, because we haven't sort of completed all of the sort of perfection. We haven't perfected the method and wisdom, the ability and gained that state for ourselves, the state of Buddhahood in which we have eliminated all faults, cultivated all good qualities, know all of the points to be adopted and abandoned, and have fully sort of brought our abilities to their culmination. So with that kind of attitude, we think that, well, I want to strive for that state of Buddhahood, wherein I have the fullest ability to benefit these suffering sentient beings. And this requires us to think long term, thinking about taking life after life after life, striving in this pursuit of accumulating, developing our method and wisdom in order to be able to attain that state of Buddhahood and benefit all sentient beings. And so here we should set a kind of motivation, thinking that we're engaging in the Dharma, listening to these teachings, not just thinking about sort of higher rebirths or even definite goodness, but beyond that, wanting to attain the state of perfect, complete enlightenment, of Buddhahood, in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And so for that purpose, I'm going to listen to these teachings. And in this way, we should set a proper motivation for hearing the Dharma.
뭐야? 당한주 참 대봐. 나와 주주셔야 되나 봐. 나와 주주셔야 돼. 당한주 가서 소수다 붙이기 따와 동반 얘기 따와서 뭐 저거나 뒤컨데서 그래서 뒤셔요도. 람단 제비 남샤 미축 봤어. 람 얌솔라니야. 타르바 토비야다네 텐데 ten에 가서 지나 세거도. 람단 제비 남샤 미축 봤어. 시 따와 딸람 베출라 라레베스. 담보 시 따와 삼로 땅사가 시데. 아니 딸람 베베데 노르스나 아니 쳬마 람 코메타 텔레테니 제부 요야테 노르제 양다고 시키고 말도. 어제도 람다 제비 남샤데 미축 베치도 시거라. 람 냠솔랑데 냠솔랑자테 냠솔랑 베 제부데 아니 양다고 마노르 체도세. 니 시 따와 딸라 베출라 라레베 단다. 아니 케시 삼로 땅사가 시지와라. 디제 탐제 메다바세르 사제 탐제 동가와세 쉐 탐제 동시 다음에 바세르 양아레 데바 시시케 와세르 전다고 검제위 시작의 내주 알아주 통주 컨디시와레 시작의 내주 뭐부주 내주 원에도 컨디시레 이 만호하지 야보지 신구요도 단당 알아주 소소를 따다 컨디레 뭐부 신달을 따다 컨디신도 이 노르데바 카르카르레로 티 노르데바 투수파메서 전달 시 내주 원에도 신바치네 시 따와데 만호하지 야보주네 삼로 따서데 만호르도 이 만호에네 랑게 주지 염문발로 소바 삼로 논주도 렘지렘지 도주요도 티인데 담부시 따와 삼로 따서가 시데 만호하지데 계셔버려서도 시 따와 딸람 베줄라라레베 따와 딸람 베줄데 동반이 따와 딸람 베줄네 동바다 텐젤라 전에 지기실에 전에 지슈라 예반이도 시베 따와 딸람 밥도자 따와 딸람 베줄네 동바서 랑원에 동바다 텐진 레버를 중화서 팅이니데 텐제디야 보 삼르타네 동바데려 고아라바체 동바세데 삼루탄도니 텐딜라 소코라고 제 텐데 코라게 텐진데버 조에 내다데 원에 가리 뭐데 대셔고요도 디인도니 갈수라 tawa tenla bechune tongpa ta tenze la penze chigi chikshu la ngeba nyedab sheba yense. Tenze samlu tane tongpa liya ngeba nyeshe nyetuwa, kwa yaku ratuwa ra. Tongpa samlu tane sa ta tongpa re kage mendu samsa mayimba tenzin debara chungwa, chawa che nyoge tenzin debara chungwa, yudu kichi yoba. Tende nyedi penzu samlu tane ne tongpa sheku re sugu ordo. Tongpa sido tongjanchi samlu tane 자시 네베 텐제도서 강가 매버전에 체다 롱게서도 차기 얼도 지실라 전에 가서 네바 녀답시버데 니셰 녀답 소소하고 야우치 제발라 소버텔레 신토바 체고레서 얼도 아니 네바 녀답시버데 라서 뭐 마와 남제스 어디줄랍니야
No, no. So then as for where we had left off in the text, we're on page 18 of the English, beginning with how to seek the view. So for us individually, how we should pursue our understanding of the view of emptiness. Here, it begins by saying, an unmistaken exposition of the path and its resultant states depends on how you ascertain the philosophical view of phenomena. So in order to come to an understanding of the view, we need to have an understanding of sort of the foundation of things, how it is that we normally perceive objects of knowledge and how we are mistaken with respect to those objects of knowledge. And so it is then based upon having an understanding of the ground, like, for example, the way the Buddha taught that all composite phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena are suffering, everything is selfless and empty, and nirvana is peace. We need to have an understanding of these things, particularly, again, how it is that we normally see things and how it is that we are mistaken with respect to those. How then do we overcome that kind of mistaken mindset that leads to all of our various afflictions? How do we do this within our own continuum, eliminate those kinds of mistaken minds? So here, this is dependent, again, upon having the proper sort of foundation of a philosophical view of phenomena that leads to an unmistaken understanding of the paths, how we pursue a particular resultant state. And so then it says, the method of ascertaining the view must be able to determine that dependent arising and emptiness complement one another. And so here, when it comes to the kind of understanding of emptiness, this is complementary to the understanding of dependent origination or dependent arising, such that because phenomena are empty of existing from their own side or in their own right, they are therefore dependently originated. And so here, it's not that one thinks that because phenomena are empty, they're totally non-existent, but rather by thinking about emptiness, by understanding emptiness properly, that leads to the understanding of dependent origination. And so too, by contemplating dependent origination, one comes to strengthen the certainty one has in emptiness. So by understanding, thinking about emptiness in terms of emptiness from that sort of emptiness of that kind of autonomous existence brings about certainty in this sort of contingent establishment in the way that things are dependently originated. Again, if one thinks emptiness and sort of thinks that that means nothingness, you fall into this kind of nihilistic extreme, whereas a proper understanding is such that these two, dependent arising and emptiness, complement each other, reinforce this sort of certainty in one another.
Oh yeah, what do you do, Karsora? And they should do Tombany shit and the Kadushera. Chidangan to Samlutan, Baja Samlutan Rishina, and when Mitaba to Samlutania we heard. This is Mitale Tunges Jera Tungel and Tamisos Mitaba da Tungewa. There's a Samlutan and the Tamis Samlutana. Quite how you go. Oh, in a social Davchina ko Mitaba Yede. Rangakivis, Tenjin Rebarijuan Bishra. Judaki Mambola Tenet and Jogiuza, Kokeji Keji and Jura Dungash. Juda Kenji Wanga Kokeji Keji Ranging or Trumne, Netum Geshimato Chige, Rawanto Chen Nashi, Umardo, Metabatina, Ramado Nashi Yomato, Judan King Shukam Neko Yordo. Induko, Tambu Medagua, Tene Ranga Migwis Medasi, Medagua, Judan King Litany Keneko, Kura Kadu Kadu Kuyinwagia, Luburtuya, Ruby Dengerango, Netum Gishayora. Oh, Medagua in the Ranga Jewish. And Danga Jukasura. Sangde Ta Suda, Sawan Zimba, Dewan Zimba, Takwan Zimba, and the Tadun Zimba. Takwan Zimba to Metaba the Congo or the Tambo, Metaba Samta. Let's Ta. Someone said they call such a Yellow Pumbula Soba. He go I give a she, but the late Miss Our Sigua. Marazo was Ludi Chashin Chesaka Shigora. Shenjachi Saka Shirochi. That is when they look, he turned to the past some time. Tanda Nibe Sogitansi, but at the same time, some joy ready or no. Ye joy give a shilia. Many Garsoda. Miss Our Setile Coyora. That you don't go share to say a pumbo. And then Ned, she miss out someone Jungus to Draco Mayordo. Or to Karina and Giore. Sang Yawase. Don't give a shiri dangazo, the junior which is some giordo. Shenjaki ve shirichi mare, ye joaki ve shirichi dangazo, Shenjaki giordo. Zang te se, and it is on that thousands and by rounds and bus. Oh, tis a chuneta panjama samlatana, yaga giordo. Ya o ditch sooner.
Mm. So here we're sort of approaching emptiness directly. It's jumping into that understanding of emptiness, but really contemplating in stages with respect to the various sort of characteristics of the truth of suffering, for example, is something that is very beneficial. To go from contemplating impermanence into contemplating the suffering nature of things, and then into selflessness and emptiness. This proceeding in this way actually like enhances one's understanding. So looking at things as being impermanent in that they arise from many causes and conditions. They don't have the ability to abide autonomously or like from their own side because they are under the control of various causes and conditions. They are occasional. They can't sort of remain by their own power, again, because they are under the control of various causes and conditions. And so that sort of understanding of impermanence helps us to enhance this kind of understanding of what it means for things to lack that sort of autonomy. And so again, we grasp at things that are really impure as being pure. We grasp at things as pleasurable that are really in the nature of suffering. We grasp at things as permanent that are really impermanent. And we grasp at things as having a self that are really selfless. So here, when it comes to that kind of misapprehension, again, we've covered sort of grasping at things that are impermanent as permanent. But when we hold things that are really impure as being pure, it's like these contaminated aggregates that we have taken up. We don't, as we should, view them as a sort of source of revulsion, but rather we view them as a source of happiness, as a source of pleasure, something that is pure or that leads to sort of good results. But really, when we investigate, when we look at their nature, there's something that should give rise to a kind of disillusionment or kind of revulsion. These are all within the nature of suffering. These are not things that we should be sort of clinging to or craving for, but we do out of these kinds of misapprehensions that we have. So here, again, looking then at sort of the way in which we grasp at things, moving on to holding them to have some sort of a self. This is the idea that things have some sort of autonomy or some kind of existence in and of themselves. And it is by proceeding in this way through the various sorts of points that we can really, once we arrive at that understanding of emptiness, it will be much more sort of certain here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that and that goes so there. So Luda Simye, Pesu Chichil Tange Negiono, Lugi Simge Tanche Conegiora, Luda Simye drama Chipset Teateliani, Sauce, Sumbuchi Tegiora. The day the Judan came Mambuchil when you led a Tagi came Mambo Saju Melungi Joda, Mambuchil Togo, thing as a Hako de Dua. Naga Sosu Yala Soba, 근데 나겠다다 닝다 로다 지뭐 내가 지금 마음 쇼지어라 계속 간게 내가 지고도 근데 뭔지 내를 체기 ken시 사회 통해 롱다 진지 만들다 지시 쇼부체제 나야 누가 이치도 탁구라고 쇼시 그 삼로 땅했습니다. 그 쇼부체 대대 규지 망보질 때는 루브르트야도 선제 대리 삼로코나 근데 소소시다 탁구지 라와지 요해 매버때다 저 대리 지와라로세 근데 살로 메다바다 삼로 땅이오라 근데 동해 와서 돼 뭔지 내년 상황실에 단다 깨가 나실래 속바로 그 생각 줄라인 봐 내매바다 랑조다 저르바다 소다도서 이 현재라 기거데 땡주르체 메다바레스 데 타딜라 그버레레 요르도 내매베타 나고레 랑조타데 갱고 차고레 선베타 치와 차고 텐데 삼르다데 고양 일을 껴게 싫으시도가 뒤에 텐데 메다바다 동해와다 그래서 삼르다나 깨지깨지 집에 텐데 삼르코나 ele rawe taas chakburo shibuchi dedada mandriwa chi yoye mebade robzo chotegdo ti sonda karsore ngo tinde samlu tanje ko taade rawa da tinde mebada tinde samlu tangura dayina ya lü da tuzo dungai kewe shichige shibu samlu tane lü la karsore soye ke tingin trube da geje 마데브체 류 컨주먼 트레샤네 메데사라 대단한 대송자스 류레 최동 최대전에 아부 송구레세 송구도와 대주 삼로 마보시 당기네 다음에 발이야 과라엘 팽게와라 야 어디지 야 주나
So here we have our kind of body and mind, and just examining in this way again the way that what they are impermanent and sort of impure in the nature of suffering, as well as being selfless. Our body and mind are sort of in this condition where they are mutually dependent. It is the case that our body, for it to function, is dependent upon all sorts of various parts. We have like the various sort of limbs of our body, but within our body, we're dependent upon all of the various different elements, as well as the functioning of our various organs, like our heart and our lungs and our liver and so forth. We need to have external conditions as well. We need to have food and other sorts of things, air to be able to breathe. There's so many causes and conditions that lead to our being alive, that are necessary for that kind of person to be alive. And looking in this way, we can see, due to contemplating the kind of impermanence of the person and the way in which they are dependent upon so many causes and conditions, it can lessen that kind of feeling of there being a solid sort of a self. And also looking at the nature of suffering, that we only have these kinds of aggregates due to the kind of previous karma that we have accumulated. And all of the things that we sort of look to as being somehow stable or solid, like the place that we live, or our youth, our health, our wealth, all of those kinds of things are actually a basis for suffering. These are not things that we should be attracted to, but rather things like our wealth is going to decline. We are going to have to experience aging. All of this is in the nature of suffering due to coming about due to the force of karma and the various afflictions. And so this kind of contemplation, looking at the way in which things are impermanent and in the nature of suffering and so forth, that kind of a sort of like solid autonomous self that we perceive to exist, it is sort of undermined by this kind of contemplation, looking at all of the sort of conditions that are necessary for life. Again, here, this isn't sort of like based upon looking at all these causes and conditions, we go into carelessness. Rather, it's important that we take care of to sustain this kind of body, pay attention to our health. But contemplating in these ways, the way in which things are impermanent in the nature of suffering, aids in our understanding of giving rise to certainty regarding selflessness.
Oh yeah, I'm going to do it. When my name is Edo, she said to Tinjung da Tongba Chadran da Gawarton de Suda. Go around when a trouba Kalenge. Do debata drama da Semzambala Sobara, and it's to the more Chiruba to Zoyungudon. Oh, there's a Samake, Umawa Namje, 지시도 땡중다 동바 개월 통데스 랑 땡진 레버 중앙이나 교단 깨라 땡진 레버 중앙이나 랑원에 여고 그래 삼교라 콘조 땡진 레버 중앙다 랑원에 동바데 개월 통고요데 우마 땡주와다 도저잖아 코 지기질 조선 로 통고요라 당고 마와 저게 어제 땡진 레버 중앙이나 교단 깨라 때네 코라야 터용고도 아세 교단 깨를 때네 고라야 태연되자 고치 랑원에 여네야 랑원에 수터고 랑원에 수깨고 와서거라 랑원에 맞게나 아니 고매게나 시차를 고저 삼로야 뭐고 고라 그 랑원에 랑원에 수매나 뭐부터 매번에 시르시거라 자 교단 깨를 때지 레버 좋아데 랑원에 예배 주선을 삼로 거고요래 싱가르질 돈도 때문에 소리 답수나 내 마야지 키워드서 고랑원에 수야 터용급에 소리지 동구도 말아서 원에 전에 고통에 그 고백 교단 경기 원매 제전디아 준시야 되고면서 고랑 수터야지 그요 말와 나고 이제 레버 좋아이나 교단 경리 때문에 기기는 랑원에 여고를 해서거라 랑원에 지주 조사지다 텐데지 여니야 기고면 생각이 깨어서 이제 레버 좋아이나 랑원에 여고를 해서거라 랑원에 매나 텐데 용구마 교단 경리 때문에 깨워도 용만 개월에 해서거라 이제 레버 좋아 교단 경리 때지 레버 좋아다 랑원에 동바스네 개월에 랑원에 여고래 뭐 땡겨와 전에 땡이 지기 조선 로고도 맞아 뭐 마와 남게 지시도세 인준다 동바스로 이제 레버 좋아 교단 경리 때지 내내 코라서 깨용 버테다 네 랑원에 동바니데 개월에서 랑원에 여고래서 거라 사장달서 사보다 장문에 신고 개와 펜주 미팅바 개와를 통돼서 동바 땡중게 돈도 건조 동바데 땡중게 돈도 통계요 말에 랑원에 동바이나 매바 차래 매바래 땡지 레버 좋아이나 랑원에 여고래 랑원에 매나 땡지 레버 좋아 리그 말에 개와래 어디 사장나시 돈이 인도 가서래 땡중게 돈도 마통바서 어디 건조 동바데 랑원에 주베 동바데 땡지 레버 좋아이 바다 교단 깬다 대달라 땡지 레버 좋은데 콜로버도 야태온데 랑원에 매바 어디 아버지 하마고 봐도 야나 딱달을 농그래 야나 체달을 농그래 서거라 딱제게 타카루를 농그래 딱제게 타니다 저 의든 좋아신 거 말해서거라 딱타스네 랑원에 여봤다나 딱타로와 랑원에 여봤달래 딱타스거라 이 여봤다고요라 이 딱달 농그래 랑원에 매나 매버를 사베네야 체달 농그거라 체바스도 여봤데 매바스네 체거라 매바지 여바수 쫓다보이네 딱타스거라 랑원에 매바시 여발을 따고서 딱타스 딱베타스 이 따와들 때 삼바들 딱바 따와서라 체다스도 여바데 매바스네 체바 이 매바 따와들 체바 따와서거라 어디에 공을 모아서 텐데다 동반이 수치기질 조선 좋아데 하마고 봐도 야나 건조 딱달 롱그레 랑원에 여서 그래 야나 랑원에 매나 매스 다 매버레 샤세 매스 그래 딱바다 타 체다카룬 그 탈 롱그레 마도 딱세게 탄예다 저 의든 좋아신 거 말해서거라 매버치 여바서기요 말에 여바데 매버서기요 말 뭐 코라네술 가래 여나 뒤다다 좋토버시 거라 이 주나네 딱세게 탄예다 저 의든 좋아신 거라 어디지 주나야 통데 땡중 우리 내려서 차단단 개발 통데 땡중기 된 개발 통데 동바 땡중기 된도 마통바도세 동바세데 땡 자원에 매바 말에 땡진 레버 좋아래 삼 땡진 레버 좋아데 랑원에 동바에 매바 말에 삼 땡이 야부지 좀 마시나서 요도 마도 대다 딱제게 타가론도 송알에 메다 야나 딱달을 홍그래 야나 체달을 홍도래서라 이니 가루 마돈 라사요 마레서라 메달라 우마 텐주 론데네 동바다 텐주 tonla mengewa sam도 마사서 우마 텐주 로들 동바다 텐주니데 개와요 마레 지기질로 tro스도래 Chidang samla tandu sa rangwene truba tongba samla tandu tinjung la kwa yarudo. Tinjung ki kwa de yabura sana tongba la kwa yarudo urese. Tongla gegi mare samla tandu chiki chiliya hendo yorese. Mengewa chamdu neba mase, tingi ngeba na ya chiki chila ngeba pewe trosun jurwa yendese. Tongba samla tandu tinjung la kwa rawa shigura. Tinjung ki samla tandu tongba la kwa yarudo ure. Chiki trosun urese ure. Ya tiba tu chikuna.
So here, essentialists, and this is referring then to those kinds of philosophical schools like the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas in the mind-only school, as well as those kinds of non-Buddhist schools that assert some kind of essential or real existence. They see these two, again, that being emptiness and dependent origination, as being contradictory, like hot and cold. So for those kinds of essentialists, they would assert that if things are dependent upon causes and conditions, that affirms that that thing must exist from its own side. So for them, these kinds of views, like something being empty of existing from its own side, that then contradicts its being dependently originated. If something is not produced or not existent from its own side, then for them, they think that that falls into an extreme of it being utterly, absolutely non-existent. So here, their understanding is quite the opposite of the Prasangika understanding, because they assert that because things are dependent upon causes and conditions, that establishes their existence from their own side. That they arise from causes and conditions is what establishes their having that sort of existence, that we could point to something. There must be that kind of existence from its own side, that we can say this is that thing. And one establishes that, according to the essentialist, because phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions. So for them, this kind of understanding of causality, of being dependent upon causes and conditions, establishes that existence from its own side. So when they hear the kind of presentation of emptiness as being empty of existing, phenomena existing from their own side, they then see that as contradictory to their being dependent arisings. And so as it continues here in the text, as long as they do not see emptiness as the meaning of dependent arising, they cannot free themselves from falling into either the extreme of eternalism or the extreme of nihilism. So here for them, if things are empty of existence from their own side, they fall into this extreme of being totally non-existent. And so instead, they want to assert that phenomena do exist from their own side. And that then falls into an extreme of eternalism, where, according to the Prasangikas, you could no longer assert that they're actually dependent upon causes and conditions. So here, again, when we are talking about these kind of extremes, when we assert or exaggerate some kind of existence upon something that doesn't actually exist, in the way that asserting existence from the side of objects in their own right is a kind of exaggeration on top of things, one falls into that extreme of permanence or eternalism. Whereas if you deny the existence of something that does exist, like asserting that emptiness of existence from its own side means utter non-existence, you're denying the existence of things that are dependently originated. This is how one falls into those kinds of extremes. So for them, for these eternalists, there's no option but to go in either of those directions. Either one says that things exist from their own side because they are causally established, and thereby they're asserting a kind of eternalism, or one says that, well, if they don't exist from their own side, then they're utterly non-existent, and one has fallen into an extreme of nihilism. There's no option other than those two. But continuing, it says, however, in the system of the consequentialist Prasangika scholars, when you ascertain these two, not only do dependent arising and emptiness not contradict each other, but also the understanding of one serves to enhance the understanding of the other. So in the Prasangika system, when one contemplates the fact that phenomena are empty of existing from their own side, that reinforces, that enhances an understanding of dependent origination. And when one contemplates dependent origination, finds certainty in that, that helps solidify and enhance the kind of understanding of phenomena being empty of existing from their own side. So in this Prasangika system, these two are actually reinforcing each other, enhancing the understanding of the other.
Oh yeah. 장바 따부 대식도 다단단 가지고 살리 장바 대테 소리 장발 샤르 마도시 달을 샤네 아우라 다가로 당부도 다가 된도 담이 삼탄도 달을 삼탄고라 네 다가 전에는 샹달라 파 카보고라 지더르초지 다가 도시네 셰바테시 꿀을 르 차르샤스 당부 소솔 다 소소라니 삼탄 담에 삼탄이 야오용고라 요즘 다다 부스 다 소소 가사 미제 대어로 하티스고라 소소 미제 단데 대대게 여게 미디스고도 다다부 랑긴 오 뚜뚜 임베세 랑긴 오데 주단 켄라 테네 뜨고도 교왕아마다 체디다 단다단다가 주단께 서주 멜롱고 중하다 소소 나자다 뜨주 강가 내가 제발 뜨고도 뜨수 가마가마 내가 야부치더니 치마치마 야부치 되게 오도 주단 켄라 테네 주바 임베세 아니 라와도 주바 요야 요 말에 야 텐데들니 요바 주단 켄라 테네 주베 텐데다 dakshida chashela tene takbe tendes juda kele maboje sobal tene kulubutu trupku yordo o tene tan de chichi res de za kasa res de mi sobota ra mi semda mi sorwata mi dushida mi pungbunga bo karul tene ani de mi res suta ora Mishanda tana soso sobres tono ote michiduse o di trashire tundure stagdo soso rochine soso samlata o nga soada dushida teso samlokone nga devumedu sero ya tevandu sero soso sobule tene nga nagdu sero tevandu sero le pata yordo chasheshi yor kurama ingenge takshisigra 역시 망부여라 소보다 셈다 소라던 도시 망부도와 소불레 참 망부도와 미다 나와다 나다 제데 소부 차샤 망부여라 대졸레 때네 아니 러시레 던두레 가르스나티 르파타요도 때네 딱베 텐데스도 어티도 코란 마잉게 차샤 망부실레 때네 아니 데시레 파타로 다가 트래시 인다 소래 콘조레레 레가치도 트래시 레가치 라고나스네 트래시 나고도 세라 콤바자 두근데 트래시 두고도 세라 다 소다 소아다 드시 풍부가보다 자와치데 네 다가 자와체바 루요라 다와뇽기 세세로 semle tawar chosne daga tawa뇽세 다 동해 뇽세 샤우라 사코 그게 역시 차셔들의 참마무 쇼치와라. 될 때에는 러파 대치지레스파 딱이 와라. 가드레스는 딱 bet는데 가드레스는 조조사스케요 말에. 실레레스 소보드레스는 그 말에 셈드레스는 데 소아데 두시레스는 되요 말도. 우마텐주 롤르테주 다르기요 말에. 다음에 봐야 말에. 계속 차셔를 내가 지도 다 내가 자와집에 샤고도 자 때내 따고 삼을 다 샤고래 타녀지 왕게 덕시치체 덕시텔라네 타녀 니치지 레스발로 따고도 타녀지 왕게 파샤고 얼마도 고랑군에 추용야지 요 말에 강가랑 지지 인세 라와도 주바지 요 말에 라와도 주바 딱서봐 가디임바스네 주구주 딱제 전에 디레샤스 라야지 요 말에 텔라 딱 메서바래 딱서봐 요 말에 딱서봐 제서봐 제버제네 다네 트시 카드레 미디 카드레서 소보데르베 셈데르베 인데르르르세네 라요 마도 자 딱서도 마주바 제서도 마주바 숙메도와 숙도도마 숙메도스네 코치 당부 때네 딱 와samle 샤워레 아까와 가게 임바스네 숙투고 말해 공오라 두고 말해 라로 지고 말해 숙투도 마주바시도 어다 다 되그래 유튜브 임베 근데 축도 라와도 줘봐 축도 봐 라와도 줘봐 똥바래서라 축도 라와도 줘봐 똥바 손자 샤라 떠진 데바디 줍고래서라 축도 봐다 라와도 줘봐 똥바 임베세 코나 라와게 축도에 요 말에 샹달 떠진 데네 코용오 샤고도 아니 뚜줍시고라 tel야 뚜줍 임베세 떠네 줘봐 인라세 되나 인주 동배 되다 오마 tenyo 로들이야 주다 켈라 때네 좋아 이나야 라와도 주베 동버 거래 dakshida chashala 때네 tanye jiwang 파르 딱 받samle 샤고 이나야 가르소래 랑원에 주베 동바시 마도 응마도 tinjuda 때나 tinju 동배 되다세 tenjen 델바 좋아 레스도 샹다 망부실레 때네 때단 레네 ane koshin ko ngo sha gu re si go ra te so da ma de ko sha thu ma ro nga ju so bo pa sha sen pa sha ne ta se jo lo ga ra ma do ma bo le ten jin de ne ta de sha gu do ne ka shi re ra du du be te na ra du du be tong ba yin be tu ne tu ba yin she ra te na tin ju tong be te da se tenjen delwa chua yimbe rawa du trube tongbare rawa du trube tongba yena ko meva mare ya shanda la tejin de ne lega chinga ji yore se o ti ngewa meva che ma tenjo lo la tenjen debare chua yimbe rangu ne tongba rawa du trube tongba suktu tu meva rawa du trube meva rangu ne meva nganju thong ne shi tembar meva o ti si ora kena tenju tongbe tenda tongba tenju ge tenda roese o ma tenju lola tongba de tende yimbe tenda ro ma to mebe tenda ro ma resera tende sonza tenjin de ban jo sonza rawa do de tongba de ma to rawa do ye na tenjin del go ma ro ani shendal tanye ye wang ge tu go ma do kora wang ge chu chu cho do ro ya nang do ni so se nawa su de tende de le se ora nawa tende loa me bada tongba khele te ko sa tongba su rangone tongba rangone tuba rawa du tube tongba de sura nang do ni so se tenje de bar jo ya nawa tende mangbo cho de nga jo da me da thong yan do wa ka sa da su da da da te da ya bu da do bu da mangbo thong yan do wa nawa tende sura te zo ka nga jo thong na shin ta da de ba yo ma re nga jo thong de za khorang ngwe ne chi du sam yi do wa yi na khorang ngwe ne chi yi do me wa chan do chi ne khorang ngwe ne zuzu sari juwe sun de tongdo o de nang do ni so se na wa ten de tenjin de bar jo wa te da rang wen de juwe tongba ni nang do ni so se ni so ba de do nang du za tenjin de bar jo wa che rang wen de juwe nang yo re na wa na she yo ma rang wen de juwe tongba re rang wen de juwe tongba re de ya le ga chen ge yo re tu tu bi le ga chen ge chi yo re do nang do ni so se Cuma dabuse ne cuma kenge tata langbu tuwe yina ngaranzu norche tata langbu ri tongu yorde ngone chene pika tata langbu tsega tonde raya yo ma to o tinda shi ngaranzu le tata shenda yiduwa da mewa da trada nye le soba rawandu trubashi nangi yorde rawandu trubashi yo ma rese Kurang chashe do chi chawa chida chi madine ni soso pa ta ne ko traye sa ko nye sa le pa ta sha yor ma do yung le pa ta kwa la me to ba tanye je wang ke sha me ko ba rawa tu tu ba chi yo ma re se go do na do ni su kuma da bu re se go do da kuma da bu tanye da trawa se de ten jin de ban jo wa so da chawa che tum ke chi yo re che da ma re che ba ma re me ba ma re ne rawa tu tu ba me sa tak be tha le yo ma re nga je thwa na shi rawa tu tu ba thong go de ten de yo ma re tak ta tre se tak che ke tanye da tre se ra o ma ke ta she de za rang ne yo na tak ba se go ra de da tre wa ro tak ta de tre rang ne yo ba ta tre wa ro che da su de za rang ne me na ta me ba de sha na me ba de le che ba se ra me ba 매번 말에 때지 대버리고 자와치 두고랬어 체바다 자오로 당시에 탄이다 제가 의식도 우매람스도 라와도 주바 뭐 많이 봐셔 라와도 주바이네 딱타르와 라와도 주베 똥바래 딱타다 자와래 매버를 배서는 라와도 두바 매나 매르서 매마래 대진 잡아서 여버래 체베 타다 자와래 딱제기 타니다 때에 유스 우멜람 세드세요라 딱제기 타니다 때에 이거라 딱제기 타니다 때에 우리 우멜람 데네세 우멜람 세도아 우멜람 데네 케바 우마 텐주에 투무 마임베 텐데 조수기 네 담바시인데서 텐데고네 텐데 조야도 우멜람셔 조야데 우마 텐주에 투무 마임베 셰바데서도 현다가 샤토고 말해서 투무 마임베 텐데 조수기 네 담바시인데서 야 티바도치 텔레콘에 쩐도래 오래 롱디파 티바도치 교샤나 야래 쩐도 롱디 라모고치 첼라
So here, beginning again in the text, it says, it is because the rice seedling exists dependently that it is empty of existing in its own right, independently. So here, we are going from the rice seedling sutra here, but really if we apply this to our understanding of the self, to the I, this is very beneficial. It said that when we contemplate selflessness in relation to the person or the self, we then can sort of extrapolate that understanding to all other phenomena. And so here, if we contemplate, for example, I mean, here in the Rice Seedling Sutra, it's going to use a rice seedling, but taking the example of ourself, we look at the way in which this thing that we call the self is dependent upon so many various causes and conditions, as well as various parts. We are dependent upon our past lives. We are dependent upon the sort of material form that we have, the various elements, the various organs, all of these various causes and conditions lead to something that we can call the person. So here, when it comes to this kind of dependent origination, we can generally speak about it in two different ways. Dependent origination, as in something is dependent upon causes and conditions. It comes about due to various causes and conditions coming together. It sort of comes about adventitiously from those causes and conditions, and the way in which things are dependently designated. Like on the basis of seeing someone's form, we might say, oh, that's Tashi, or in the independence upon our own kind of feelings and consciousness, we designate, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, or we look at various objects and we designate them as being pleasant or unpleasant and so forth. But it's not as though any of these things exist from their own side, but rather they are dependent upon causes and conditions, as well as being designated upon a particular basis of designation, something that is made up of many parts. So say when we see the form aggregate, we might say, oh, that's Tashi, or that's Tundrup, or whatever. But it's not as though that exists if we were to try to point to something that exists in that basis of designation, in its own right, as that thing. We wouldn't be able to find it. But yet we can talk about someone, like when we see the form of someone doing particular activities, we say, oh, that person is doing some work. Or in dependence upon someone being injured, we say they're like something bad happening to them, we say, oh, they're injured, or whatever it may be. In dependence upon our various feelings and mental consciousness, we say, oh, I'm happy, or I'm sad. But when we try to find then the thing designated, we try to find that self or that I, there's nothing that we can point to. It's not just the form, it's not our feelings or consciousness or any of those individual things, but it's something that is dependently designated on that particular basis of designation. But the self isn't utterly non-existent. It exists, we can talk about it, it's something that exists due to conventions, due to our labeling in this process of mental dependent designation. So when we look at the way in which the self appears to us, it seems to exist from its own side. So here, again, this continuing in the text, it says, moreover, it is empty of existing in its own right. It is because it is empty of existing in its own right that it exists dependently. So phenomena appear to us as though they had some kind of autonomy, like our idea of self is as though we have this kind of self that is not contingent or dependent upon anything else, that is like existent in its own right, that would be able to bear analysis, the kind of us trying to investigate and find something. This kind of existence is the way in which things appear to us. But when we really examine, we can see that there's nothing that exists in its own right. And that fact actually establishes that things are dependently or exist dependently. So it is, again, these two understandings that are mutually reinforcing. So it continues into the next. So again, we can talk about these two levels of dependent origination. There are more, but particularly the kind of dependence on causes and conditions. Things are empty of existing from their own side or in their own right because they are dependent upon causes and conditions. And there's the level of dependent designation. Things are empty of existing from their own side or existing in their own right because they are dependently designated. We can't we can't point to a self within the various aggregates, our form and feeling and consciousness and discrimination and karmic formations. There's not something that we can point to and identify as the self, but also there's nothing aside from that. We can't point somewhere else at some kind of a self. So it's a mere dependent designation. It exists in this kind of contingent way. Here again, to say that something does not exist from its own side is not to posit its non-existence, but rather those things are then contingently or dependently designated, and things don't really exist in the way that they appear. So here, continuing into the next sentence, it says, this combination of appearance and emptiness, wherein dependent arising is the meaning of emptiness, and emptiness the meaning of dependent arising, is illusion-like existence, or the middle way that is free from the two extremes. So here, when we look at the combination of appearance of things, and this is referring to the infallibility of dependent arising, that negates some kind of extreme of there being nothing whatsoever. And at the same time, when things appear, although they appear to exist in their own right, they are empty of existing in that way. Yet these two things are things can function within this. So when it comes to understanding these two in combination, when it's referred to as like illusion-like existence, in the way that when a magician or someone conjures up various illusions of like horses and elephants and so forth, although those things appear, they don't exist in the way that they appear. And so too, when it comes to things like our enemies and friends, that which we designate as pleasant or unpleasant, good or bad, they don't actually exist in the way that they appear, but that doesn't negate that their existence completely. They have a functionality, and we can talk about how dependent origination means that things are functional rather than totally non-existent. And if they actually did exist from their own side with that kind of autonomy or ability to withstand analysis, that would fall then into an extreme of permanence where there would not be any way for things to be functional. So this kind of understanding wherein emptiness and dependent origination come together, are complementing each other and actually understood in tandem or in connection with each other. This is what is referred to as illusion-like existence, or the middle way that is free from the two extremes. There's no autonomous existence from its own side in that level of like permanence, but there's also things are not totally non-existent. So this path is then the middle way, free from any of those extremes, either of those extremes. And so this is the sacred key point in how to posit dependent arising that is unique to the Madhyamaka Prasangika school. So this kind of understanding in which dependent origination and emptiness are fully sort of complementary of each other, mutually reinforcing, is the unique kind of assertion of the Prasangika school. And so then we'll follow with this quotation from Nagarjuna that follows.
Oh yeah. And the Kong Changi Wara, Tindra Yimbate, and the Lobian Eka Soda. Gumbulu can Nagarjune, Zondogi Kapsu Song Shahase, the Kong Changi Wara. Then de la Condes or the Yimbala Cone, and it's Zondoles. Gumbulu Hera, and Zondolet in the Sondoas. 강시 동당 땡중당세 ngobu 강시 랑원에 주베 동바인베 아니 땡진레버 중화래서 오라 땡진레버 중에 ngobu 때다 랑원에 동바래서 오라 그봐 오메 람도 땡직 바르세 강시 랑원에 동바데 땡진레버 중화래서 땡진레버 중화인데다 오메 람 지나 우마바 남지도베 딱제게 타니다 저베 유세 지오라 딱제게 타니다 저베 유세데 오메 람세데 랑원에 주베 동바인베 딱타다 저로와 땡진 레버 중화인베 체다다 저로와 땡진 레버 중화인베 고 자와메지 요 쌈미 마레세 땡네 메바 마레세 요레 땡진 레버 중화를 땡네 자와쟁게지 요레세 서한테 체바 마레 메바 마레 랑원에 주베 동바스데 랑화도 주바데 여바 마르와세 딱타타 체다니다 저베 람테 땡지 레소라 강시 동바인바데 땡조레 땡조인바데 랑원에 동바레 이yen데 아니 딱제게 타니다 저베 유 로 땡지예베 동바인베 땡데스 자와체네바다 랑화도 주바 메자 자와체네스여바데 오메람스도 오메람도 어디서 대적바라 손조 총바 메바에 산제들을 차세로서 전도지 최저지 값을 산제리아 저배식도 송기 총바 메바 산제들 차세 땡데데 개첨부인바데 뭐물로도게 자와시럽다 대숑마부 최저리아 땡데 송베권에 산제를 뜨고도 가게 땡지들바죠 가와메가 gem메바서 자와시럽 값을 tire되어로 오야 시송세 이제 요리야
So then citing a source for this, so with this in mind, the Venerable Nagarjuna states in his text, Dispelling Debates, so Nagarjuna then says, I bow down to the unparalleled Buddha, who made the most excellent statement that emptiness and dependent arising have the same meaning as the middle path. So here again, this is Nagarjuna is saying that which is dependently originated is free from that kind of existence from its own side. So whatever thing is empty of this kind of existence in its own right or from its own side, then that is dependently originated or dependent arising. And so this kind of understanding, this statement that links emptiness and dependent arising as having the same meaning, leads to the path that is free from either the extreme of eternalism or an extreme of nihilism. So because things are empty of existence from their own side, this dispels any sort of permanence, any sort of eternalism of that kind of existence in their own right. And because things appear, they are dependent, there are these appearances, dependent originations, this means that dispels the extreme of utter non-existence, of nihilism, because that is the way in which things exist and function. And so this kind of dependent origination underscores the fact that things are empty from their own side. And so in this Dispelling Debates, as well as in many other texts, we see how Nagarjuna, like in Verses of Wisdom, in his homage to the Buddha, praises the Buddha particularly for this unique understanding of emptiness and dependent origination. So we see that this is the way in which the Buddha is most worthy of praise, one could say.
Oh yeah. 아까 네 똥바세 좋아라. 똥바세 돼. 어디다 너야 약간 뭐여도. 그래서 우리 낭바게 내 추탐제 똥바레서 그래서 신이야레서 그래서 켈링이 오면서 매번 유르거서 그때 여도. 또 담라 집에서 추가가 매서로 그때 용기와라. 가서라. 제가 깜디 똥바대야. 자와 진리수 예배 똥바르서 말해서 매 사시색배 자와지 그래. 출렘배 자와지 그래. 롱기 요배 자와지 그래. 그래서 내가 챙겨지 매서 템바 좀 게다 내가 챙겨다로 대화다 동에 기지 교다. 그래서 매서요 말해서라. 깜디 똥바야 뭐보나 자와 진리수 예배 똥바 민지세. 자와 진리게 매서네 그게 매로와. 동해령계 매를 니 대화토에 매를 니 이제 전부다 자주 셈지도 거야 요 말도 semje mere ne semje mene tongge nywa yo ma do mebal se yo ma re chara kam di tongba se tongba da tenjun se tongba de yebe tongba le se yo ma re ngo bu nam chawa chinu su yebe tongba mi ye se rangshin ji chuba da rawa do chuba tongba le se go re rangshin ji chuba tongba ye se shiro nyingbu de chene chu tam je rangshin ji tongba namba ya da bo che so tao se go de so go do ani su me se chu tam je ten re so go do ani su me tra me tre me se re re le rangshin ji tongba ye re re cha de ne te yo ma do cha ko ye yo ma do ta de chi cha se do wo de chu tam je rangshin ji tongba namba ya da bo che so tao se ani su tongba se tra me tre me so go do te shejin gi de ka so te an ji den gi tan gi wa gi gi tan dan ba ne ma yin no so go de ne so me tra me tre me se so yo da o ja rang shin gi kam de tong ba ya chen nam cha wa chin ne so yo ba tong ba le se ma re se rang shin gi tru ba rang wa do tru ba rang wen ne tru ba so do do tru ba ta su do tru ba che su do tru ba se ra da ten de me ba te le so go re se go ra rang wa do tru ba tong ba yin de se sikse tadi kong zhang gyo ra uma tenju wege ni keba te se sung sarba chi de lobin dao zhang bada de war do chandar kirde diga uma zashin dreba sikse rwa diga psun de sung shaa si go ra ko cha ne se le dan cheba bo le yo re se le dan cheba bo le sakba bo drebu la sokba me do sen drebu dan drebu nyawa la sokba me do she ma wa ya ma yin de se eso me se yo marda so do ona chi shena so ona keran tongba se te kar se go se na de da rangshin ge me do se de zo rangshin ge rawa do chen rangshin ge tuba ma ru che ma che tu tu chen shen da la te je del ne lo da tanye ge lo da da shi da zo le del ne ene te de re se cha sha ne o tin de chi yo de ma do koran rangshin ge su tuba rangun ne tuba tin de chi yo ma re se ta da re so do se go do ona chi shina de da rangshin me do she number joba ye no se rangshin ge me se sha ge ma do me se go ma re chara ene ngo ma zo to ba ku ra chi de rangshin me ba nam la cha wa me de be chere ye ba so na do ba ni do nyam na rangshin me se na ne kera me ra kuna rangshin ge me ba ye na rangshin me ba ye na ne me ra ko ngo me ra ki me na cha wa che yo ma re te chi ba re kera rangshin me se wa da me se wa ni de chi ba re sam go ra chi de rangshin me ba nam la cha wa che ba me te be chere ngo bu ma wa se go ra me te be chere da ye ba so na do ba ni do nyam na o kera chawa cheba te garsra cheba boda le da drebula sobati meba me se wa da rangshin gi me se wa cheba de se kyendin jogu de se wara rangshin gi me se wa le kyendin jogu de se nyeba sona do ba ni do se kyen tang de sama rangja rang ra sona nebre ta ga ra kyen jogu de se wara do ba ni do nyam na se ya yo ba ma yin de se de uma chik se gi lo de da sama da 대한 대 예바 총바 말해서라 랑신다 제바 남 코나라 자와 마도세 랑신지 주바 인세나 에네 자와 제바데 태그 말해서라 랑신지 주바이나 에네 샹라 때 메고 바리 주고요라 에코 두제 마잉게데 주고 랑신지 주바이나 라와도 주바시 랑신지 주바이나 샤이 규단 깽게 쮸 메고 바 닥시다 차셰 당에 용게 샤 메고 바시 요고요도 랑신다 제바 남 코나라 자와 마통에 칠세 랑신지 좀네 자와 롱고 말에 랑신 메바 남 코나라 자와 통해세 랑신기 메 뚜뚜비에서나 다 자와 강가 통 대그레 시고라 랑신 메바 남 코나라 자와 마통에 칠로 시소서 어디 우마 칙세기 롱장도 대치 줄라
No. So here, then there is this kind of danger of thinking, of danger of misunderstanding that when Buddhists talk about sort of non-existence or emptiness, that means total non-existence. So here it's in the text, it says emptiness in this context does not mean that composite phenomena lack the ability to perform functions. This kind of assertion that things are empty of existing from their own side does not mean that that like fire is not hot and burning, or that fire or the water can't moisten, that wind doesn't have motility, and so forth. But rather, it's sort of the opposite of that. That if things had that kind of existence from their own side, they would not be able to perform functions. So rather, emptiness here means to be empty of intrinsic or independent existence. So here, instead of understanding this in like a nihilistic kind of sense where nothing whatsoever exists, that emptiness means non-existence, wherein then no one would experience suffering. There would be no sentient beings. There would be no one to attain anything or be harmed by anything. That's not the kind of understanding that one should take from this, but rather that things are empty of intrinsic or independent existence. And as a source for this, then quoting from Chandrakirti's clear words, it says, "We are not saying that action, agent, and effect do not exist. What do we mean? We posit that these phenomena have no intrinsic nature." And so here, the next part of this with the qualm and the answer actually in the Tibetan seem to come all from this quote from Chandrakirti's clear words, not yet going out of the quotation. But so here, like when we see, for example, in the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, like the Heart Sutra, where it is said that one should see perfectly that all phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence. There is no form, no feelings, and it continues on. One should understand that that intrinsic existence is carrying over. It is the case that no phenomena have the kind of intrinsic existence, that sort of autonomous existence from their own side, the ability to withstand or bear analysis. And so here, again, when we are stating that things lack that kind of autonomous nature or are not existent intrinsically, that is not, again, saying that they're totally non-existent, but rather, as it says here in Chandrakirti's clear words, we posit that these phenomena have no intrinsic nature, that they are contingently established, dependently originated, not existing from their own side. So it's not falling into some sort of extreme of total non-existence, but actually if one were to hold that they had such intrinsic existence, that would negate their ability to function. So here the qualm comes, someone says then, well then it is not feasible for things with no intrinsic nature to perform functions, and you are still subject to the same fault mentioned above. So again, that this opponent thinking that a lack of intrinsic existence means utter non-existence. That's not what is being asserted, but rather the answer comes, that is not true. It is only things that possess intrinsic nature that cannot function. So if things had this kind of intrinsic nature, they wouldn't be able to function. They wouldn't be subject to causes and conditions. They wouldn't be subject to dependent designation. Rather, they would exist sort of in their own right without any kind of contingency or dependency. And in that way, that kind of autonomous existence is in contrast with functionality. That doesn't allow for functionality. So the kind of here, if they had that sort of intrinsic existence, again, phenomena would not be dependent upon any kind of causes or conditions, not be dependent upon their parts or on their basis of designation. It is only because they lack that inherent or intrinsic existence that we are able to posit their functionality. As it says, it is only things that lack intrinsic existence that can function, and that is the end of the quotation, at least in the Tibetan version.
Oh yeah. Rangwa do drube tong yang se ta rangwa ne drube tong ba yin na ya. Den jin drebar jo ala jawa tham je ruwa. Ruwa cha chi ruwa se ra. Me sek ba da lung gi yo wa da. Chu len ba da ruwa sai te che ba la so ba. Ya ne ruwa da te ba da ruwa. Ge wa drub ne da wa to ba da. Mi ge we tong yen to ba la so ba. O to le ga chawa chu den drebi chawa kang ga rung ge se ga do. Rangwa ne drube tong ba yin na ya, rangwa ne me na ya. Te ne drube chu ji ngobu tsama tamje rang ge chawa chetu penyo retu gurese pemba da nebala sobe chawa chetu ba shagu gurese o di shaya de ani shindu shakawa rese rawa do tube tongya tudup tsam nyela gyunde chaje tamje ruwa dine tene shindu tokawa das o tingi gewa meba shaya de shindu tokawa rese ngobu mawa tuzu shatu medwa tishin shikbe sungi zoe gi cheba samur songde so de to kawa yemba da sanje ge sungi naga zoe ge naga be cheshu ke cheshu de ba songde se ora sashi le se lobe ludu ge ne de dinal sawashira ka songdo as ge ora tichir shembe chö de tengdo kawa ken gyor ne tube to ne chö de le rabdu lo war chu ba es o nagar jone kawa songdo sashi ka so tichir shembe chö de se uma bale shembe uma tazu sugyardo tichir shembe se uma bale shembe uma tazu kese chöde se teji debar jebe chöde se ro teji debar jo da tongba imbe chöde se tingdo kawa kenjurne se ting tokbar kawa kenberde shenye sabude shenye de kale kabu imbe kene sugora tube tu ne chöden le rabdu lokbar jubayes tuba sanje chumden de sanje sane chöden bale lo ne chö masum je da kashe shubare do o di shubare se ora nganjo di sanje chumden de sanje sane chö masum de shone ene changba da to ya chö soro che shugudwa yuji tabi chö she koyne sula tenja kwar menebe mema namdam nido never chase songudwa sepsi tote se dumaches saba shewa trobadan travase de tongbani de songudwa sepsi tote se dumache duzita bi choshe koyo nyese sula tenja kormen be memana dam yedu never jata de kotoya kabure shase ne songi mese rani tene ne embal nege songudwa nandam never jata shedanse o tene shidin le jase ngombo ke shidin kapso tagana shason doase tenjin debar jo de jawaye songi zo gi cheba samu dese tenjin debar jo ase tongni de nigal ko chora tenjin debar jo aybe rangune tongba rangune tobe tongba aybe tenjin debar jo aybe de sogora tenjin debar jo de jawaye songi zo gi cheba samu de sanje ge songi nage be cheshu ke cheshu de ye sogora sabshu de ye sogoda o tenda o de to kale khabu de se to kawa yoza sanje ge de to kawa imba de kene sanje se ne chuma so ne to shuye de sabshi to de se de ma che se yuji de bi che ko ni so la te ya ko me mana de ne bar chas so ye ti ti re se ingo ma to zo ge te to to ma do ma te gyo da te zo ma to che o ye ti shi na
So, here, then continuing again, although everything is empty of independent existence, the functioning of causality is feasible within mere dependent existence. So all functionality, all of like sort of going and coming and staying, and the fact that virtue will lead to happiness and non-virtue will lead to suffering, all the sort of like actions and effects that they have, including the sort of things like fire burning things or water moistening things, wind having that sort of motility. All of these things are functional within the fact that they are mere dependently originated, that they don't have any kind of independent existence. So this is the way in which these two are non-contradictory, but this is extremely difficult to understand and is also said to be the most profound and cherished principle in the treasury of the Tathagata's teachings. So here, to posit these as being non-contradictory is something that is extremely difficult, but to do so is really the most profound and cherished kind of principle within the Buddhist teachings. So for example, the essentialists, those kind of realists, are not able to understand dependent origination and emptiness as being in harmony, as being mutually complementary rather than contradictory. So here, quoting from Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, it says, because he understood that his teaching would be difficult for others to fathom, the Buddha decided not to share it with others. So after the Buddha had attained enlightenment, recognizing how difficult it is for others to understand this Dharma, he remained without teaching for a period of time until he was sort of compelled by Brahma and others who made this request. So we've seen there's like that the verse expressing this kind of profound, peaceful, free of elaborations, uncompounded Amrita-like Dharma. This is something that the Buddha, upon initially realizing it, saw that it was so difficult for others to understand that he remained without teaching it for some time. Of course, because this is so difficult to understand without some kind of contradiction. So the continuing from another quotation from Nagarjuna, this time from his friendly letter, it says, "This dependent arising is what is profound and cherished in the treasury of the conqueror's teachings." So although this is quite difficult to understand, it's really the sort of essence, the most cherished kind of thing within the treasury of the conqueror's teachings.
Oh yeah. Tena ume lam chowa na se. Tawa tongbanyi tawa chowa kugu yonarwa. Tawa tanya da che ume lam de chowa na se. Rangi dyoji jangba dabu shi sonde se. Dyolle yebe jangba yena dra kangba yena dra kangsa yena dra sta soso li te kari ne cha shordo. Shi sonde se. Judan kien dele de dar chowa da se. Judan kien chokba la tene ko. Jujin wange Rameba Luburto Juare, some tension driver, Juda Kela tension driver, Joe, some Tangoda. And Gabe Jude, Tendege Namshatas. Young God to do some coach Juda Kel Chilton chorus. God to be ordered, Judo or Yes, Jibase. Gabe Jude, Tendege Namshada, Ragi Namshadas. Juda Kela Tenet, show Juda Kela Tenet. Gandu tendrik namsha de sigura jawadan gagbe namsha rangi dawshile tene tagbe tenjungi namsha de dales ne ke tsare de rangi dawshi kansa rojine phumbu nga la tene taba ro o tene pe chala so shabre chine kabuta de chine namdu de chine kummi mambu kale mambu chebje de so che dichti ke yordo chüge yorwa Juda Kengia Chegi or the Kujin Kansa, Chebabu Kansada, is Tarda Kuba the Tamambo Gira, Tezukanga Chigordo. Today, Tezusamal Tenenitsu Namdru in a current discern, Ashi, Dina Chashe Chilo Pagbada Nalo Koloda, Amambu Ordochala. Oh, Ashila Tene, Tezushi Chene, Namdru Res, the Namdru Res. Any day cancer de Tania Namdu Person se, Namdu Pabgido se, Namdu Chitos, Chala Chili Churches, and Namdu Churches, Shas, Shagua, Shas, Namdu Nal Mitegi or Mindru or does it never Kanga Rungi or in a co Ashida Chashela Tujan Drelne, Lopa Tagba, Tesam Namdu Shagu, the Matochig, Namdu Penge de Cadres, Chilizu Seke Marwa. Chilo Bakba de Mare, Nalo Tarda, machine tonda Mabu, Chala Mabu, Tarda. This is Rezu to Sake Mara. Tene Tedala Tene Tane, Tagba Samle Shagura, Nambu Pirata, Nambu Chawachebada, Tinane Tarda Chick, machine chili churches, Nambu churches, or Tishagudo, engine Deborah. Engine drain the Lupa Tane Sha. A cadres and a second donation, Rayashi or Mare, Tasso was chess with the Recomberdo. Oh, Tended the Lenire some tango, Tambuchuda Kelet and a Chalamambu or Tezone Sugiora. So it's an any Tanyatan, title being Tagadua, then a tagmet and resigua, then a kibet and then a tagmet and this. Oh, look at that. Tendegi Namshada, Dashila Tene Tagbe Tenjungi, Namshan Didale, Umelam Chogo by Indian Sashiles, oh, Tawaze du Tendesene, Juda Kele Tene Kibet Tendeta, Tene Tagbe Tende Samlutane, and a round when the Tribeton Bate, La Quara et Pshicha Udesora. 대진 대버는 좋아가 다 자와시를 농장도 이래 대진 대버는 좋아가 되네 동반이도 셰스 차셰다 주단 깬다 낚시다 차셰라 대제 대단 레네 줍den게 뭐부 가인 바테스고라 얘네 동반이도 대랑원에 줍에 동바레서 라와도 줍에 동바요 말 코랑게랑 신기 수주에 개요 말에서고라 얘네 동반이도 셰스 아는 고 동반이는 데 매르베스나 남주 매르베 간사 매르베스나 어디 말에 간사 요래 남주 요래 로 남주 페기 요래 대기 요래 간사 개벨에서 거를 미게서 대완 용거를 동행 용거를 요래서고라 된 동반이도 셰 그래서 요래 때네 닥바데스 라게 닥실라 때네 차실라 때네 디체지 레스 디 남주 레스 파 다그도 딘 미레스 디 발라레스 디 던도레스 파 다그도 때네 딱바 참래 샤고레스 거라 때네 딱바 데스 때네 오멜라미노스 텐진 데버리 좋아래 랑군에 동바레스 딜이야 로 텐진 데버리 좋아래 랑군에 드베 동바레 랑군에 동바에는 다 매르서 말에 때네 딱바 참래 샤고레스 역시대 차실할 때네 디카와른 디pom바른 디메른 디강바른 디모다른 디남루레 디kam부다르스 바맹타그라 딱바 대참래 이바 샤고레서 때네 딱바 참래 타녀지 왕게 샤과 덕실할 때는 도저히 타녀지 왕게 샤과 이왕게 여봐서 코나장장 수 여봐에는 그 이게 랑원에 랑와도 주바로 타녀지 왕게 샤과 레그마도 똑배 왕게 샤과세도 뭐야 대제 레버를 좋아가 되네 동반이도 셰 되네 때네 닥바데서 어디 여당도 셰고라 되네 때네 닥바데 이 오멜라미노스 체바야 말에 닥바야 말에로 랑원에 주바야 말에 네 랑원에 매나 매버서 매버 말에 자와시 그래서 딱지게 타니들 저 우마데레스 거라 이 오멜라미노스 셰단스 이메다 설류장배 돌래자다 님도 로션들 얘들이 좀 된대지 설류장발라 시그네스 결론남란 도디 송소세 결론다 대진 레버라 좋아 통화대 쇼통어세 대진 레버라 좋아대 아버지 통소나 아니 내루디 통토고도 제 아버지 통소나 근데 아버 통소나 최대 통그래 최 팔람이라 계속 거라 여러 대진 레버라 좋아 통화대 쇼통어세 최 팔람이라 계게 내수대 내루대 통그래서 수 최통화대 팔람이라 계게 내루 통화대 아니 텔레텐 조엔 레부 상계게 내루 타두대 통화래서 세송소서 얘네 텐데게 쇼남 근데 팔람이라 계다디 제마 용용그라 텐데갑서 단도 오대 양치람네드 마라 결론다서 대진 레버를 좋아 통화대 최통어서 수 최통화대 상계 통어서 슈그네루 통화대 상계그네루 통화래서 시소소 때나 근데게 최남 랑신기 동어 시자와데네스 야 알고리 티버드치 랍게베 야 티버드치 손다 상계 통어 시소소야
So, here, then, thus, when you seek the middle path, you must take an object such as a rice seedling and search for this path in terms of the presentation of, first, the dependent arising of the causality involved in both its creation and destruction, and the dependent arising involved in its being imputed on a basis of imputation. So, here, when we are ourselves sort of seeking out this path, seeking out the view of the middle, whatever sort of object we take, whether it's a rice seedling or the self or whatever sort of thing that we have in front of us, we should examine it in terms of both its causality, in terms of the dependent arising of the causality involved in both its creation. So things arise adventitiously due to a variety of causes and conditions. That object, that thing that you have taken, is dependent upon various causes and conditions for its arising. And so too, when it comes to its destruction, its extinction, this is dependent upon various causes and conditions. So that's the first sort of level of looking at the dependent arising of the causality of things involved in both its creation, the way that things come about, and their destruction. And then as well, one should contemplate the dependent arising involved in its being imputed on a basis of imputation. So here, when it comes to whether it's our self, like the self that is designated in dependence upon the five aggregates, or like a computer, or a plane, or whatever it may be, we look at these various things and we see that they are dependent upon all kinds of causes and conditions, all sorts of various parts. Like something like a plane takes a great deal of effort. There are all kinds of, like, there's the external parts, there's internal sort of machinery and workings and all of that. And when we look at a plane, we can say, oh, it's taking off. Oh, it's landing. Oh, that plane, there's a problem in that plane and it's not able to go. And we can say those things coherently within the context of conventional reality. But if we try to point to something within that basis of designation that is the plane, that exists as the plane without being other than something that is merely dependently designated on that particular basis, we can't find something else. We can't find something that is sort of like apart from the various parts, apart from the basis of designation, or this process of designating with mind. So here, again, when it comes to contemplating these various phenomena, whether it is sort of something like a plane or the person or whatever it may be, one should search both in terms of that causality of things arising due to various causes and conditions, as well as recognizing things as being imputed upon a various or like designated upon a particular basis of designation. So this allows us to understand how things don't exist from their own side. They are, again, dependent upon various parts, dependent upon that basis of designation, dependent on the various causes and conditions that lead to its coming about. And so therefore things are empty. But that when we say, like here, as Nagarjuna does in his fundamental verses on the middle way, whatever is dependently arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent imputation, is itself the middle way. So whatever is dependently arisen, this is then asserted to be empty. And so when we hear this word empty, someone might think like, oh, that means total non-existence, as though there's no sort of happiness or suffering, no beings whatsoever. But rather, instead, it means that things are existent, but not in this way that they appear, as though they have some kind of like solid existence from their own side that is autonomous, not dependent or contingent upon anything else. Like when we see a plane, we can say, oh yeah, there's a plane. But if we search for that thing, we try to point to what is that plane, there's nothing that can be found. But yet that thing is not totally non-existent. To say that things are empty is not that they are non-existent, but rather that they are dependently arisen. So whether it's a human being or a pot or a pillar or a computer or an airplane or whatever it may be, these are all existent as mere designations, as mere imputations posited by the force of conceptuality. So here in the second half of this verse, again, that being a dependent imputation is itself the middle way. This kind of existence as being a dependent imputation avoids both the extreme of being like a nihilist, wherein there's nothing whatsoever, or an eternalist, where things are sort of permanent and fixed and unmoving. So seeing then going back to the rice sutra, it says, the Blessed One, after looking at a rice seedling, spoke this sutra to the monks. Monks, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So here, if one understands this well, this kind of middle way that is free from the extremes of nihilism as well as the extremes of eternalism, and see well the way in which things are dependent independently originated. One who sees the dependent arising sees the Dharma, here referring to the Dharma as the Eightfold Noble Path, recognizing the nature of things, the mode in which that abides. Then whoever sees that, whoever sees the Dharma, whoever understands the Dharma in that way, also sees the Buddha. So here, following this quotation from the Rice Seedling Sutra, which again is when one sees that kind of nature of the Dharma and the Buddha as lacking any kind of intrinsic existence, but still fully functional, this is something that we shouldn't just accept because of the Buddha said it or because the Buddha is powerful, but rather this is something we accept based upon our own kind of investigation and analysis.
Oh, yeah. Tena tendeji chö namse ta chu shanrwa jusen tena se tama jusen tesole tena sigyo do tendeji chö nam rangshin ji tong se sanje chum de ge ne tenji rebar jowe juda kyal tenji rebar jowada tene tagbe tende de la tene sogora tendeji chö nam rangshin ji tong o se rangshin ji trube tong ba re se juda kyal tenji rebar jowe chö kan bata dakshila tenen dokje ge tokbe de deoshi mingda tokbe takbe chu kayen bate se tenen takbe tende kayen bate se rangshin ji trube tongbare rangone trube tongbare rangi ngoyo trube tongbare nganzo rangi ngoyo yoba tonggu yore te tongana shi tembar ma truba re se tongu so tende song yore se ra o she chawande ne kebo ge kachi nangche ne te Kurang wangja pechu chene dagara yin se shenda kele ko urdo o tina shi sanje ma kachi na ni te chinju samage te rawa me ba kele ko ba te ma rese te kele ko ripa kyuse mambol tene kyuse de dan de yo se te sone ma ene ngara zu te kele go arma do o kyuse me ba da sanje so rese kele ba da te ma rese go to kebu ka chikta bo se 원단 더버 삼제 더고 바시 고년에 더고 바시 말에서 이 이마에 알아서 주지 삼로 단전에 르바 망부여로 어때서 때네 이 임바데 셰고레서 거도 산제 송보 삼비 이치바시 말에서 주지 르바 타야 바시 요레서 동바 주지 르바 망부여레서 된데다든 대다게 나네 자 랑원에 주베 동바 주지게 르바 망부여베 나네 네 규세 타르투 다음에 바베 르베 게부다비 텐디 르베 게부다부 르베 게부텐디 텐지 시고랑 가자 르베 게부 다비 텐디 텐지데 텐디기 텐지 테레스고라 게부데 bunge메 로소체네 콩투사르데 타르투사데 진디만디 요네 게불야 또 구요도 타르투사르지 어 티네시 고비 네루 카르이 마이데 tenjele togu ora nambachana juda kela tenje debar jongsu teda tene tagbata o tele tene ani rangshe ji trube tongba tenjele tene midagba trubsure tenjele tene dunga trubture ro tenjele tene dame ba trubtura o tenje debar jongala tene ani juda ji cheba takji rawa chingi tayo ba ka tugure tenje debar jongala tene takbe cheba boyo ba 지소 세아랍다다 지대 제법고 딱바 연계 딱바랑 중기 집에 세버렸어요. 그래서 강가도 텐들 때네 방고 도요도. 이제 텐조를 반대에 땅에 잡아다다 셔버셔라. 텐제 레버를 중간 중단 절로 될 때네. 근데 따왕에 뭐 망보치와를 그래서 강가도 많이 받은 데가 하고 도그래서 거라. 근데 나루 그 샤에 메다 동에 또 담벨 소버테서 텐들 때네 줍도요도. 무슨도 교단 경에 자와체다 될 텐파 좀 얼마다 나스티티레시 이치셰고 같은데 말했어요도 텐데게 리반딩이라 테니까셔 텐데게 텐진데라 야부게 케바남지 아부게 케바서 용다 리베 게부 텐데 텐지 소구라 근데 텐데게 텐지 셰 요소나바 요소 칭아 텐데 텐제들 베기아보세 르바 강가나나 타톡서르 디티레시 송교도 어디 인디틸리아 tende songbade ngazo yane yando samlutane teletene meda donge ton damela sogbada takji rawa chege ta mebala sogbada ro ane takbe juda ke meba takbe jide cheba boda chiso la sogba o tezo kanga de tendel tene ko to gyordo o teso de yane yando ngazo samlutane titone ngwe ne su seda mari ba ngazo samju na le yeba no dream mambu yoba te tende tendele tene seada ro achinji malok be tene tenda de ba tende samlutane sheto ba chago de te yana yando samlutan ko esre sedo ya tende so oh yeah.
So here again, therefore, you should not accept the statement dependently arisen phenomena lack an intrinsic nature merely because it is the Buddha's wish or because the Buddha has some power, as you would accept the edict of a king. Rather, there are limitless reasonings establishing this statement to be true. So here, when it comes to the Buddha having taught that all phenomena are dependently arisen, and dependently arisen phenomena lack this kind of intrinsic existence. So the Buddha taught this thing, taught that whatever is dependently originated is empty of that kind of existence from its own side. And although phenomena appear to us as though they have that kind of intrinsic existence, if we actually examine and investigate, we can see that those things which are dependently arisen are lacking in any kind of intrinsic nature, although they appear like that to us. And so this is something that we shouldn't just accept merely because it's the Buddha's wish or because the Buddha has some sort of power and we're afraid of that or something, or accept it just as we would the edict of a king, but rather it's based upon our own reasoning and our own logic that we can establish the fact that things are that dependently arisen phenomena lack an intrinsic nature. It's actually using this reason of dependent origination that we can establish things like impermanence and suffering and selflessness and so forth. This kind of reason of dependent origination can eliminate the kind of grasping at a permanent, autonomous, unitary kind of a self, that more sort of a coarse view of a self. It can also eliminate the sort of idea of a permanent self-arisen kind of creator. Dependent origination is able to eliminate all of those kinds of wrong views. And so it is based upon our own contemplation of dependent origination, that things are dependent upon causes and conditions, as well as they're being dependent upon the process of designation. It's not that we should just accept that things are dependently originated because the Buddha said so, but based upon our own logic and reasoning, we can establish this and actually eliminate many wrong views. So again, among these, the sort of reasonings, the limitless reasons establishing this statement of dependently arisen phenomena lacking intrinsic nature to be true, among these, the ultimate and peerless reason that proves this lack of being established by an intrinsic nature is the reason of dependent arising. This is the sort of ultimate reason that we can put forth for phenomena to lack some kind of intrinsic nature. And therefore, Indian and Tibetan scholars praised this reason of dependent arising, saying the reason of dependent arising is the king of reasons. This is a key point that should be contemplated again and again. So again, based upon the kind of this ultimate, this reasoning of dependent origination can eliminate so many wrong views. It has the sort of potential to eliminate our grasping at things as permanent and that which is suffering is happiness and so forth. And so based upon knowing the way in which things are dependently originated, properly understanding that, that can eliminate such wrong views that we should repeatedly contemplate with this kind of reasoning and engage in it again and again.
Oh yeah. Da shi ji la de be da shi da da xue ge wa shi de xie de wa. Shi ji la de be da shi da da xue ge wa. Ji da ko da shi de da xue re da xue le da xi ju re yo de shi ji la de da shi da da xue ge wa shi de wa. Da shi se ne be na kang ba re ji ne ko da ge gong da zi ba da to da kang be cha la re ne da shi re wa. Kang ba de da xue ste la da be xue di kang ba re da be xue da. 풍부가보다 아주 소보다 샘다 소하다 뜻을 간가 덕시로 강사스 다스나 뒤딱셔되라 남주르지나 남주치 빡바다 콜로다 나로 마신다 레레레레데 덕시로 될 때는 딱 봐도 남주데 딱셔되라 될 때는 딱셔되라 저는 시질을 때도 남주르지나 그 덕시되다 딱셔되 개그로 덕시스도 차셔레레레네 치 빡바다 나로 콜로다 아니 지금 마신다 때도 레레레레네 덕시를 되어라 둘이 딱 배쳐도 남주들이 되어도 시직을 때도 덕시 딱셔게 해서 그라 지다 덕시 딱셔게가 말하더나 미행하라주 소부디네 다기 덕시로와 다기 덕시로와 다양 소부 코란을 락바다 강바다 치다 나스네 딱셔제 소부 코란데야 딱셔제 누구라 소부딩 아주 덕시에 다기 덕시리도 딱셔에 소부 야나 강발락발라 소바다 미 나와 나라 소바 테솔레 때네 류시 기비 류시제 딱이 어도 저 딱시다 딱시기 얘기 말해 딱시 컨디션에 그 딱시지 요구도 딱시지는 딱시 코란래야 딱시 요구로 디스고라 시질로 되베 딱시다 딱시 개와서 어디 되실랍나 담보
So then we turn to this next point, which is the contradiction in one thing being both the basis of imputation and the object imputed. So when it comes to the thing that is designated or imputed and then its basis of designation, those two, in the case of one thing, cannot be the same. So here, when it comes to like, it is on independence upon the 5 aggregates that we designate the self, the I. So that self, that I, is not the same thing. The thing which is designated is not the same as the basis of designation. And so, but here, like, for example, the way that we designate like a plane on a particular collection of parts, or we designate the person on the collection of their 5 aggregates, those cannot be the same thing. It would be contradictory for the thing designated to be the basis of designation. But this, we should understand, it's contradictory only in the context of one thing. So like, for example, our form is part of the basis of designating the person. But when we take that form, the thing that we call a person's body is then the thing designated upon a particular other collection of parts. So all of these are always sort of relational. There are contexts in which, say, our form then becomes the thing designated, and it is designated on this basis of things like our hands and our arms and our legs and our whole collection of those parts. And so although in the context of the person, it is part of the basis of designation and thus is not the thing designated. In the context of like the human body, it is the thing that is designated, not the basis of designation. So when we're talking about different things, that's not contradictory, but it is contradictory for one thing to be both the basis of imputation and the object imputed.
Oh yeah. 당가라서 미 다다 강사서라 다당하다 강사시다 된지로와 미 다다 강사시바야세 집에 소지 규진나 속발에 중심세 어디 레다 내지 단다 소외 때만 붙일 때는 곧 소구요도 중심세 랑게 닥시 직소지 감루다 랑게 닥시 집에랑 시제지 감루 속부 나르예베 착부 차도들 사이 감세도 니 추감 차라 소버도 추감 사이감 추감 저도들 매감세 롱게 감세 우다도 다해서라 사이감 추감 매감 롱감 남게 감세 동사 부가 남가들으시라 우당고요를 나로려 동보요고도 우당에 들으시고라 부가 남게 감을 써봐 수지감 제 사이감 추감 매감 number 10 kamla soba kam rusira kechi nam kechi chungni sayba me kechi nawe kechi ne kechi che kechi lugi yigi kechi susugu kechi trai kechi tigi sobu sugu chada tende mambu yordo kechi nam se kechi nam da se 풍부 나보 남래 가야 다인 바심 어때서 간가 다가 닥시레서 거도 지난해 찍리 다레서 찍리야 임바치 요 말에서 오라 다시 풍소령어 타데비야 때서 간가 파샤네 틀레페 고 타데바 뭐 세부나시 때서 많이 계시 따다 발라나시 배 카가시 고 타데스도 뭐 타데 애들 로스 로가인가 뭐 세부나시 풍부가부디 파샤 때 많이 게야 ngombo sebu nashi pumbu nga ngombo nashi che sebu nashi chi taasi loga pachi yo tiye yo ma re se wara dashi pungso le ngo tade be taja me las teta na ya pumbu so la tene tachi tanye takwa sambi chawa chini ki ta joku re se ra tazu le tene ne taasi tane tene chawa chini ki roa da deva da tewa nyewa tunga nyewa kansa de chawa chini shaku re este zamla 다 용게데 카드레스네 찍레 조우주세케요 말레세 다네 시싱달레 소바 컴퓨터레 소바 남둘레 소바 테조 차셰 망부요르도 콜로라 소바 테조 레레네 dak시레세 야라 싱다 테조 레레네 dak시 망부요레 동자 망부이지라 남르주나이네 텐디 테조 강가데 싱다 롱고 마레스 코나 dak시레데 티난 싱데 남도 임바치 컴퓨터 디레스 찍리 조수세케요 마라 저네 어디나시세 아게 다시 풍부서 가야 다임바 풍부가다 디나예베 사주멜롱기 조알라 소바 대주난 다임바치 요 마레스고라 대달레 때네 다지 딱바레 대주 dak시체네 다데 딱바레 다데 딱셔레 대주 간가 거기 dak시레 dak시디 다임바 레기 마레 텔라 때네 딱바니지 때 마임바 줍시라 자셔레레 때네 바다두자 dak시디 딱슈디 레기 마라 시치글라 때디 dak시 딱슈 게르레 대달레 때네 다지 딱바 임베세 간라 때네 독베 dak시티니세 간라 때네 다사게 다 간라 때네 다도사게 dak시이나 다 마인게 지코라 다데 딱슈르와 풍부가보데 dak시르와 풍부가 나네 다 임바시요네 이니 dak시타 딱슈티 가가고르도 때네 독베 dak시티 텔레 때네 딱베 딱슈티 미루와 송베치르스 탄다 어디 간라 때네 딱베 dak시티 텔레 때네 딱베 딱슈티 마임바시코레세 dak시 나네 딱슈티 요 마레 딱슈시데 테달레 때네 딱바샤고라 딱바 쌈샤고라 대인배 공장게요라 로변 다오다바 챈더케데 오마주베가 소사 돌레 풍부 때네 연송바 디질 풍부 되삼 다 마이스 도에갑서 풍부 초발을 때네 다지 딱바 연송샤아체라 풍부 초바 풍부가 초발을 때네 다지 딱바 인데 풍부가 초바데 다마레세 때 dak시레스거라 돌레 풍부 때네 연송바 디질 풍부 되삼 다 마이스 풍부 되바 잠데 다 마레세 때 다게 dak시레스거라 이나쇼 소보다 셈다 소하다 도시다 다테나네 사다 추데 트라 소바테 주강가 레레네 다 마레 다게 dak시레스거라 이 공장게 왔다 마주바 돌레 풍부 때네 연송바 대질 풍부 되삼 다 마이세 풍부 되발라 때네 다 딱바레세 대송자 풍부 되바데 다 마레세 이 dak시레세 다데 딱슈레세 셰송세 되나 셰소소 되나 다다 간사 제바야 유진 누구도야 누가들었었던다 어디면 되자 되나 다다 간사 제바야 유진 다 dak시 풍부소라 때네 종아 잠도 여바 연기스러와 다다 간사라 소바테주 가가 dak시 풍부소라 때네 종아 잠도 여바 연기 풍부 셈네 풍부 나네지 풍부 dak시레서 풍부 나네 다임바지 샤예요 말에 풍부 셈네스 풍부 나로네 제네 디레샤세 지주고 주세요 말에서라 다임바시 니주 멜라서 야 dak시데주 파샤네 테마인게 다지야 로가 로스페 오카가지리 오르베테요 말에서라 가야 야 dak시 풍부레 오 셰시네자 다인바 신이주 메데세 대단한 다다 니주 요나니 다랑 신주 버는데 그래 다랑와도 주바요 그래 대전에 세능이 요나 다랑 신주 주바요 그래 티와 말에서 어느 가라 다여바르나 대דר 세네 다인바 신나면 니바 미시도 소야 티시고잖아
Mm. So here, then, continuing from this point of the contradiction in one thing being both the basis of imputation and the object imputed, the person or the self, again, these are sort of synonymous, in connection with a human being, arises from a collection of various causes and conditions that are collections of perishing objects. There is nothing from this, there is nothing that is the self from among the bases of imputation of self. So here, the way that this is translated is a little bit strange, but so the kind of various organs, the senses, or the five psychophysical aggregates, really this is referring to the kind of the sort of various kinds of elements and things that make up the human being. So here, the sort of various things that make up this basis of designation include like the elements, the sort of heat that is within our body, the various kind of solidity of our body, the moisture and so forth, the sort of empty spaces between things, the kind of wind. There is again here nothing that is the self among the bases of imputation. So like the various 6 elements or the 5 psychophysical aggregates or any of the sort of basis of designation, we can't point to anything within that that is the self. And again, the self arises from a various kind of causes and conditions, as well as a collection of various parts, our previous karma and the various sort of elements that make up this kind of a basis of designation or something that are constantly perishing and changing. But there's nothing within those that one can point to as saying like, this is the self, this is it, I can point to it and find it. But there is also nothing that is the self that is a separate entity from these bases of imputation. It's not sort of like there's something distinct like yellow and blue where we can point to a self that is somehow unconnected, unrelated to the aggregates. But rather it is the case that these are things that are merely imputed. So thus the self, which is nevertheless able to function, is posited by merely imputing the convention self, independence on the aggregates, and so forth. So here the treaties often compare the self to a chariot. Just as none of the bases of imputation of a chariot, its various parts, are suitable to be the chariot, so none of the bases of imputation of the self, the aggregates and so forth, are suitable to be the self. The reason being that the self is imputed in dependence on the aggregates and the rest. So it's not, therefore it is said that it is not feasible for the basis of imputation, that independence on which something else is imputed, to be the imputed thing. So here again, we have this various sort of like collection of parts, our aggregates, and all of the various things that contribute to this sort of collection of things upon which we designate the self. Well, the self can't be any of those things. It's not as though among the 5 aggregates we can point to something or anything else within that as being the self, but rather those serve as the basis for imputing a self. So too, like when we have something like a chariot or a computer or a plane or whatever it may be, we designate that object on a particular basis of designation, but you can't say that thing is something within the basis of designation. Those are 2 separate things. So Chandrakirti then says in his entry to the middle way, the sutra states that the self is imputed in dependence on the aggregates. Therefore, the mere combination of the aggregates is not the self. So again, it's not, the aggregates act as a basis upon which we designate this thing self, but there's nothing that can be found within those. There's no way, continuing here in the text, there's no way to find something that is the self from among the aggregates. So we can't point to something among the aggregates that is that a thing imputed. Again, those are the basis of imputation, but there's also not something apart from that. That can be identified as a being that self. Other than the aggregates, we can't posit such a self. So here, the thing designated or the thing imputed is not its basis of imputation, but nor can it be imputed or posited outside of that basis of imputation.
Oh yeah, that is so.
No.
You're way. You're good way. Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
we'll stop there for today as we're out of time.
oh yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Love Song's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kabir. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.
Thank you for those precious teachings again. Thanks again for your very clear interpretation, Katrina. And for our friends online, we'll see you next Thursday.
진짜 제마제용 게.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, let's go. Yeah.
Recording.